และถัดมาค่ะเรายังมีอีกหนึ่งหัวข้อที่น่าสนใจนะคะซึ่งช่วงนี้ค่ะเราได้รับเกียรติจากสปีกเกอร์จากชาวต่างชาตินะคะวันนี้ที่ท่านมาร่วมเสวนากับเรานะคะในหัวข้อที่น่าสนใจทีเดียวนะคะกับหัวข้อ Global Trends on Agtech Startup Investment นะคะแล้วก็ Trend and Opportunities นั่นเองค่ะ Alright, and next I would like to invite Mr. Michael Dean, Co-founder and Chief Investment Officer on the stage. Please welcome ขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับด้วยค่ะ And the next one I would like to invite Mr. John Crane, Managing Partner from Nest of Thailand. Please proceed onto the stage. Please welcome ขอเสียงปรบมือด้วยค่ะวันนี้นะคะท่านผู้ประกอบการทุกท่านนะคะจะได้ทราบนะคะเกี่ยวกับแนวคิดต่างๆนะคะที่เป็นการเติบโตขึ้นทางด้านธุรกิจและก็สตาร์ทอัพของสไตล์ของ Agtech Startup นั่นเองนะคะ So firstly would you please introduce yourself and about your company Yes
Hello everyone, my name is Michael Dean. I'm co-founder at AgFunder. AgFunder is an online venture investor. We started life as a crowdfunding platform for food and ag technology, but have since moved into the investment side. So we're investing ourselves, early stage to Series A, maybe Series B, depending on the opportunity. We've got two funds that we're investing from, and our idea is to invest globally and right across the agri-food supply chain, so the entire food system. That's us.
Hi. I'm John Crane. I'm managing partner of Nest here in Thailand. Nest is a venture group that was founded in Hong Kong, and we help startups to scale, and we help corporates and governments with innovation programs. So somewhat similar to AgFunder, we're both an investor and an ecosystem builder.
So let's talk about Agtech, about the startup. What are the keys to success in developing in Agtech innovation or startup, sir?
I think if you're looking to start any startup, you've got to obviously identify, you've got to have a passion for it. I think that's going to be crucially important. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're not going to succeed, is my experience. Setting up an agri-food tech startup is incredibly difficult. Most farmers get a couple of dozen goes at getting it right in their lifetime, being that they have usually one season to grow crops, and so they're very, very reticent to try new technologies because if it fails and it has an impact on their crop, obviously they're going to lose their income for 1 year. So convincing these farmers to do what you need them to do, which is to trial your technology, is incredibly difficult. So you need to be addressing real problems that they're facing, not just something that's going to be what we call a vitamin or a vitamin. You need to really sort of focus on a crucial problem that they need to fix and a pain point for them. So that's for me that's really important. And when you're building your business, keep a cap on costs. It's hard to raise money in startup world, so really watch your costs. Don't pay yourself a big salary. Investors don't like to see startups that pay themselves a big salary, and they like to see burn as low as possible. So really keep it lean. Stay super focused. Focus on a particular area, a particular problem, and one that farmers need to fix. So speak to your customers. That's a crucial point.
And how about you, Mr. John?
Yeah, I think I would echo most of what Michael said. I think for any startup, it was kind of a broad question, but for any startup, this issue of product market fit is just critical. So as he said, you need to be addressing a problem that really needs a solution. And the issue of timing for an agtech startup, I think in thinking about funding your business, you need to have a very careful plan of how you're going to evolve from your concept through commercialization and how you're going to fund that evolution given the timing he mentioned with farming. It's a seasonal business. So if you don't have your pilot in the right place at the right time with the right partner, maybe you have to wait until the next year. And very few startups have the runway or the luxury of time to do that.
And so what's about the future trends of the agriculture technology about the startup or investment in the global perspective?
What are we interested in? Global trends. So we like. I think soil health is really interesting. We're seeing, we've got to produce a lot more food with less land or no more land.
Yes.
Certainly we see in places like China where 20% of their agricultural land has been destroyed by heavy metals, so they've got to remediate that. So we've got to produce more food with less land. So I think one area that hasn't been focused on too much, it's starting to emerge now, with a bunch of companies that are looking at microbiome and focusing on soil health. I think that's going to be a crucial area because that can lead to additional yield gains that otherwise we wouldn't be able to get. I like robotics and mechanisation.
Yes.
Certainly in some markets like Australia and the US, cost of labour is very, very high. So I see a bright future for robotics. I think the ability to introduce robotics into a platform that allows a farmer to take off and operate their farm from an iPad, for example, is something that's going to be for us in the future. Obviously, transferring that over to smallholder farmers and getting the unit cost down is going to be difficult. But I think we need to start with that, and it won't be too long before we start to see impacts into developing markets in that regard as well. I think cultured meat, clean meat, is important. Cellular agriculture.
Yes.
It's funny. The whole. When I was growing up, I didn't think about where my food came from, but that's changed completely now. I remember when my daughter was 3, she asked how this chicken she was eating died. And I never had that thought never entered my mind when I was a child. But you say you're never going to lie to your children, but we told her the chicken died of old age. But there you go. So I think being able to feed that many people that are coming with the food system that we've got, we're going to need some alternatives to how we're farming animals at the moment. We recently had a case in Australia where a whole load of sheep died in a live export into the Middle East. And there's just outrage because of the way we're treating animals. And I think that's going to be a growing trend. More and more people are going to want to understand how their animals were raised, were they slaughtered humanely, were they treated humanely. And I think we'll see, mass production farming is going to decline. We'll see it being a key niche. But I see that there'll be a rise in cellular agriculture when they can get the cost down. It's still about $2,000 a kilo to produce at the moment. But that's going to change, like everything. As the technology develops, it'll get cheaper. So they're the key areas that we like.
So what's about you?
Well, as Michael and I were discussing just before this, in my mind, what's driving the trends is this imperative to find ways to do much more with much less.
Yes.
So by 2050, there's going to be more than 9 billion people on the planet. 70% of our fresh water is already used in agriculture. So any technologies or solutions which find ways to better utilize resources, be it water, arable land, etc., I think are very interesting. So you have companies focusing on irrigation solutions to use less water, use water more efficiently, or companies that have soil additives to trap water, all of these to make better use of the water. The urban farming, you've seen some very big fundraisings for companies that are doing urban greenhouses, vertical farming, so as to feed people with local produce, organically grown, without needing more and more arable land to do that. As Michael was saying, one of the challenges to agriculture is that you have consumer preference for organic, you have consumer preference for humanely, raised, and all of this means that your yields are lower. So you have these combating factors against each other, and any solutions that help to solve that dilemma are going to be very interesting.
Yeah, just adding on to what you were saying, John, we're wasting between 30 and 40% of our food.
Yes.
There's a lot of good technologies that are emerging around waste and obviously reducing waste, but also treating waste in a way that is not going to ruin the environment. So, that's an important aspect as well.
So you think this is the future trends nearly, right?
Yeah, this idea of treating waste or recycling things as well. You now have a lot of circular economy type businesses evolving in various industries. There's a huge rooftop fish farm and greenhouse that's been built in Belgium, where they're recycling the fish tank water to feed the plants, using rainwater to feed the fish. So it's all kind of an encapsulated ecosystem. And I think you're going to see more and more of these kinds of solutions.
So what's about the major factors which convince or attract to the investors to fund on the Agtech investment startup business?
So when we look at an opportunity, the first thing we look at is the team. The team's crucial. If we've even developed algorithms that help us put a score according to the team. Now that doesn't always ring true. We invested in a company in Australia where the founders weren't Harvard graduates or anything like that. But so there is an element of gut feel as well around the entrepreneur. We need to know that the entrepreneur is going to walk through walls for their business, that they're not going to fail up here. They may well fail ultimately, but it won't be due to their work ethic and their ability to keep their business on the right track. Like I was saying before, and John and I were saying, fixing a real problem. Is it a vitamin or is it a painkiller? It really needs to be a painkiller. Is the market big enough? And can the CEO communicate the message? Can they tell a story in a way that is cogent? Because we're early stage investors, so we need to know that the investment that we make, the entrepreneur is going to be able to go forward and raise additional rounds at different times. And if I've got to walk up Sandhill Road, for example, with an entrepreneur, I want to know that they're going to be able to carry their own when they get in there and be able to sell their business effectively.
And how about you?
Well, I think Michael comes to a very interesting point there at the end, which is thinking about Agtech, maybe more than some other tech sectors. When you say what attracts investors, I think you've had up until now very different types of investors. A lot of the big exits in this sector have been driven by big agri-businesses like Monsanto or John Deere or DuPont buying these startups because they've evolved technology that they didn't innovate themselves. And that sort of an investor, I think, has a very different mindset from a more commercial, traditional venture capital team who are, of course, focused on an exit.
Yes.
Now that you've seen a couple big exits in recent years, I think now the venture capital world is jumping on the bandwagon much more than previously. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Capital drives the ecosystem. That's the bottom line. If you want to get these big VCs, as John said, they're looking for an exit. Corporate venture capital. These big guys, they need that DNA. They can't develop it in-house. They've been operating one way for so long. They know that disruption's coming. So the best and cheapest way for them to obtain that is to acquire or license or partner. And that's what we're seeing a lot happening now. But when there's more capital, when we see some exits, that's when the name brand VCs start to come in. And we're seeing more and more of that happening right now.
So on the trends, Michael mentioned microbiome, which has become a big thing both in health tech and in agri-tech. And I think isn't Indigo? I think just did a big round, right?
They did, yeah.
And I don't think they're looking to be acquired by anybody, right?
No. They're an interesting company actually. They're really truly disrupting the way that farmers grow their grain and sell their grain. They're selling their own grain coated with their microbial treatment. And they're offering to buy it back from the producers as well at a premium. That is fundamentally disrupting the way farmers have done things in the US for many, many years. Traditionally, farmers have just bought their grain from the same guy their dad did and their granddad did, and they've sold it to the same elevator that their dad did and their granddad did. So now what's happening is Indigo are saying, well, you buy this seed, you put it into your field, you'll get a 20% uplift in your yield, and we'll give you a 20% uplift in your price per bushel. But what that means is that Indigo need to develop a supply chain to be able to do that, to be able to collect the grain, to be able to sell it on, which is a really big move. But they've raised over $300 million now, so they've got the capital to do that. Those that have come before them and have failed because they didn't have the capital to do that. So, there's a lot of skepticism around whether Indigo are going to be successful, but I think they will. I think if they get that supply chain piece right, there's enough end users for this high quality grain, whether it be protein content or what, that they'll pay that premium. And I think it could, it's got a good chance.
Yeah, what's very, very interesting about their technology is essentially what they're doing is almost soil recuperation. consumers are so anti
soil health piece.
Yeah, they're so anti-chemicals and pesticides and herbicides and things like this. And this seed coating that the indigo is using basically is improving the health of the microbiome of the plant and the soil. So it's reversing the negative effects of chemicals. So they're both solving that problem and they're producing a yield benefit. So I agree with you. I think it's fantastic technology.
Yes.
You think about the applicability in countries like Thailand, where there is a higher use of chemical fertilizers and use of chemical herbicides. Being able to regenerate your soil just by planting a seed is a fantastic concept. It really could have resounding impact on certainly markets like Thailand and other markets in Southeast Asia.
So amazing, yes. And basically, as we know well, Thailand is one of the agriculture producing countries, and most Thai farmers still remain working in the traditional old way. So about the small crops and the idea of Agtech startups has just begun in Thailand, and we don't have enough startups to meet the need. So what about in your perspective, in the term of developing deep Agtech startup in Thailand, which the president should be concerned first, and then we are going to the next. Yes.
I think we need to see an ecosystem developed here, and I'll pass it on to John in a minute because I know he's done some programs around startups in markets like Thailand. But it's crucial that we have an ecosystem in place where you have the research that's going on, whether that be universities or research institutions, and then the ability to commercialize that technology. It happens everywhere in the world that great technology is being produced in research institutions and universities, but it's that commercialization piece that's a problem, and it's that jump into commercialization where we have the sticking point. So it needs to have every level. You need angel groups, you need government support, you need accelerators, you need incubators, you need corporate support, and you need investors. You need the corporate investors, the VCs. A lot of people, are very negative about VCs, and a lot of VCs, can have a negative impact. But at its core, venture capital is about taking a punt. They can be, less than founder friendly, and we're certainly working to change that. But they do play a crucial role in really sort of advancing these new technologies that are coming through. So, in my situation, I would say, government policy that encourages entrepreneurship by encouraging investors to invest, early stage investors to invest, whether they be angels, tax breaks, things like that. The ability to set up a fund, tax deductible, no capital gains tax on the returns. Incentives like these that really encourage people to say, yeah, well, I'll throw 10,000 into this startup. Crowdfunding. What a fantastic opportunity, way to democratize investing. 10 years ago, the only way you could invest in some of these opportunities was by knowing someone or being rich. That's all changed now. So if you take this sort of broader view, that we've really got to engage the entire community, build an ecosystem around startup methodologies, and really focus on promoting technology and that leap from research into commercialization. I think you'll be on the right path.
Totally agree. I think that in all of these emerging markets, IFC or World Bank, one of them published a report about smallholder farms, and they estimated that there's 450 million smallholder farmers who feed 80% of the developing world. And these are the folks into whose hands you need to get these technologies, which at the moment are too expensive for them. So how do you bridge that gap? That's the challenge. And I think the only way you do it is by bringing together, multi-stakeholder type platforms to do this, which was the conclusion in a report by the TDRI last year.
Yes.
I think Thailand, they know the answer that they need, which is you need governments, you need universities, you need NGOs, you need the investor community,
yes,
all to work together to make this happen. And there are examples emerging. We did a program jointly with the World Bank in Kenya last year. There's a program called Better Life Farming, I believe it's called, that the IFC, IFC, Bayer, IFC, Bayer, Netafilm, Swiss Re have done this for small farmers, and they've piloted it in India, Kenya, and the Philippines. and they've had fantastic results in
Wow.
improving yields. And Swiss Re is bringing the insurance piece because one of the big issues for farmers is funding, and the banks don't want to finance them because there's no kind of credit history. They're so small, they're at risk. So if they can get crop insurance, then the banks feel more comfortable to lend. All of these pieces have to be fit together, and it's a challenge. But I think it's one that the models are emerging, and certainly Thailand has everything that they need to make it work.
Yeah, I agree. The Asian Development Bank's doing similar things, and it's really great to see these public institutions that are investing in new technologies and investing in programs that are not just going to throw a whole load of money at someone, a bunch of farmers, and hope that they pick up what they're supposed to pick up and then move on and increase their yields. The way it's been done for decades and decades. Now we're talking about integration with different stakeholders, so that when a farmer does adopt new technology, he's not or she's not concerned about having to worry about losing their crop because they're trialling this technology. It's so important because it's good for the entrepreneur because they get their technology in the hands of a real user, so they're getting real feedback on what's right and what's wrong with their technology, and allows the producer obviously to potentially increase their yield, increase their access and their literacy around technology without having to worry about losing their crop just because they're doing the right thing.
So at last question, what are your suggestions for someone who hears just start at about the Agtech startup in Thailand? What about your suggestions?
Just make sure that you speak to your end users. Make sure you understand what your customer needs. That's the crucial point. Watch the money and run hard. Just go as hard as you can, and don't let anyone stop you. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. If you tick those boxes, you'll be a long way towards getting there. And let me know. Reach out to me.
And about Mr. John?
Well, going back to the trends we discussed before, I think if you're thinking about an Agtech startup, pick a problem. As Michael's saying, you want to be a painkiller, not a vitamin. So, pick a problem that needs a serious solution. As he said, talk to your customers, because something that works in the lab doesn't necessarily work in the field. And you don't want to find that out when you're 18 months into your startup, that your lab-tested solution actually doesn't work out in the field. But there's a lot of challenges out there to be addressed. I mean, I'm personally one of my favorite is these protein alternatives. Well, not protein alternatives, but alternative proteins that are developing. There's a European company called Protix who are doing animal feeds and fish feeds from insect protein. And there's a company in the States that actually is doing protein bars for humans from cricket powder. And it takes a lot less water to raise an insect than it does to raise a cow. So, these kinds of new and different ways of approaching things, I think if you find an innovative solution to a problem, your startup's going to succeed.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to add, for those alternative protein markets, Southeast Asia is the perfect market because you've been eating insects as part of your diet for millennia.
Yes, it's a question and a problem.
Yeah, but it really is a way to scale, and producing insect meal is an awesome way to do it, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
So anyone has some questions? มีไหมคะท่านไหนมีคำถามสงสัยอยากจะถามสปีกเกอร์ของเราทั้งสองท่านไหมคะขออนุญาตเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะคะมีไหมเอ่ยถามได้เลยนะคะ So anyone has some questions about the Agtech or Agritech technology startup Thailand? Anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Michael and Mr. John. Please a big round of applause to both of them เอาเสียงประมือด้วยค่ะขอบพระคุณเป็นอย่างมากนะคะสำหรับทั้งสองท่านเลยนะคะอันนี้ที่ให้เกียรติมาร่วมพูดคุยนะคะกับหัวข้อสตาร์ทอัพนะคะที่เกิดขึ้นนะคะในประเทศไทยซึ่งถือว่าตอนนี้นี่มีน้อยมากจริงๆนะคะสำหรับสตาร์ทอัพทางด้านการเกษตรแล้วก็ทางด้านอาหารนั่นเองนะคะ